Today we're going to be dealing with those prospects who tell you, I think we're all covered, we've got a team who deals with that, or some other form of brush off. We're going to be looking at situational questioning, and we're going to be finding out how do we get the prospect to open up when they seem so closed. So situational questioning, put simply, is how do I ask a question that puts the prospect in a situation where they have to deal with the problem we solve. And why would we do that? Well, it requires a deeper level of thought. It requires the prospect to have to justify and explore why that problem wouldn't exist, why they are all covered, and how great the team is at dealing with said problem. So we're going to look at a few different styles, a few different strategies, a few different questions and approaches that might just get your prospects opening up a little bit more when you feel like all hope's lost. So the first one loops in another technique, the one last question technique. So let's imagine a prospect has said to you, you know what, I think we're all covered. Like with all things that prospects say, like all objections or challenges, the first step is always welcome. So we're going to welcome that. And it'll sound something like this. You know what, I thought you would be. So we're going to welcome it. No combative energy, we're not going to fight it at all. And just as we go to show them the door ourselves, you know, I thought we would be. Do you mind if I ask you one last question before I let you go? We're going to just ask that little bit of permission to ask that one last question. Most reasonable people will say, well, yeah, go on then, you can have one last question. And this is where we're going to employ our first situational question. So the first one, can I ask you one last question before I let you go? What would happen if a problem came into your life? So it might sound something like this. Do you mind if I ask you one last question before I let you go? What would happen if there was a cyber attack? Now the prospect's then going to have to explore, dismantle, walk you through exactly what the process would be, and maybe it'll be just a short summary, maybe it'll be something much more in depth, depends on the personality that you're dealing with, but within there will be a little bit more detail that you didn't have before and might just be an extra crack in the door to get you back into the conversation. None of this is a silver bullet, but it certainly could be. The second one. Makes sense. Do you mind if I ask you one last question then before I let you go? The prospect hopefully agrees to let you have that one last question. What would have to happen to make you consider something like this? Now, what would have to happen? Again, I'm putting someone in a hypothetical situation where they've got to explore what would happen. And in my team of people who are doing cold calls for software companies all day where the answer is, oh, we've already got something that covers that. When we say what would have to happen to make you consider something else, they start listing, well, it'd have to be better at this, it'd have to have more of this, it'd have to have less of this. And suddenly we start getting a list of things that are very much feature based, but often if we're lacking in a feature, it means that we're experiencing lots of a particular problem. So often if we're lacking in a feature, we're experiencing a problem. Now another example of this might be when someone says, we've already got a team who deals with this. You know what, I've got a team who deals with this already, so it wouldn't be a problem for us. Again, we're not just going to tap out there. Same method. Okay, makes sense. Do you mind if I ask you one last question before I let you go? And this is where the magic can happen. When you ask your team, out of those problems I just mentioned, which one were they struggling with the most? Now two things are going to happen here. They're going to tell you exactly what happened when they talked to their team about this, or they're going to say, well, we've not spoke about that before. And then this is where gently your inner skeptic is going to start entering the chat, and you should be exploring, why have they not had that conversation before? When was the last time it came up? What was the result then? There's so many different paths that have opened up from someone just disregarding you and saying, you know what, I'm not interested. Suddenly we're back into the conversation and we're putting them in that situation where they deal with the team. So using that can really keep the door open. Now you've got to imagine when you pick up the phone to someone and a stranger answers, their brain is designed to keep them safe. So the system is running a series of checks on, is this boring? Is it of interest? Is it dangerous? And once it's done all those things, only then do you get to speak to the human being, right? We call this the inner gatekeeper. But the reason why this is so important, the situational questioning, is because the knee-jerk reaction for most people is, you know what, I think we're all covered. I think we've got everything we need. But there's a key word being used there, I think. And I think demonstrates uncertainty or a lacking of clarity. So by asking situational questioning, what we're asking for is the engagement of the imagination. So we're looking for hypothetical situations as low risk and exploring them, and it looks for that cognitive flexibility. So it allows your prospect to explore the possibilities. And then in doing so, we should be starting to kick in some sort of emotional activation. So in a hypothetical situation, if there is an emotion also and a bit of deep thought, that's when we're going to be hitting something that I talk about all the time. Deep thought, emotion, which should lead to action, which is what all salespeople should be trying to do. And then there's also the obvious cognitive processing. So I'm putting something in a problem-centric world. Can the prospect illustrate how that problem would be solved? And can they talk about it in clear terms, in real terms? And when they do so, you should be making an assessment as a salesperson for, are they all covered? Is there a problem here? Can I help them? Or actually, now we've unlocked this a little bit more, actually, is there nothing here and do I need to move on? And the other thing is the psychological distance. So when we're in the real world, that's when I have to be risk averse, CTO or whoever it is that you're dealing with. I have to put my guard up because that's what I've been hired to do. I've been hired to protect this business from risk. But in a hypothetical world where we're dealing with imagination and hypothetical scenarios, it's not as important. So we can talk more openly in that hypothetical space. It's why therapy, hypnotherapy, why people go on jungle retreats and take crazy medicine, is living in that other space allows so much more freedom. So that's why it works. So in closing, situational questioning, think of it as a way of asking your prospect a question that puts them in a situation where they have to face the problem, okay? So the examples we've used here are, what would need to happen to make you consider something else? When you spoke to your team, what did they say? And if the problem were to occur, what would you do? Those are 3 examples. There's many, many more. If you want me to make another video on even more situational questioning and strategies, let me know. But for now, give those 3 a try. Let me know what you think.